You've been told that money is earned through effort, that the harder you work, the more you deserve. But that's a lie dressed as morality. The rich don't chase money. They make money chase them. If you think wealth is a matter of luck, talent, or inherited privilege, you've already surrendered the game before it began. The battlefield isn't the marketplace. It's your own psychology. The poor fight with labor. The rich fight with attention, timing, and leverage. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince, he wasn't speaking only to kings. He was whispering to anyone willing to understand the invisible architecture of power, the game behind the game. Everything you have, or don't have, comes from one root: how you perceive value, and how you teach others to perceive you. Money isn't paper. It's agreement. It's faith materialized. And faith, like fear, is psychological. That means it can be engineered. You don't get rich by saving. You get rich by shifting gravity. The poor accumulate, the rich circulate. They make energy move. Pause for a second. Look around your life. Every object you own was once a thought. Someone else's idea turned tangible. Someone decided the rules of worth, and you accepted them. But here's the secret. Those rules can be rewritten. Machiavelli's first principle of psychological wealth is this: control perception before possession. Because whoever controls perception already owns the outcome. Think of an investor who buys fear while others panic. The stock hasn't changed. The numbers are the same. But the psychological atmosphere, that invisible air of confidence or terror, determines who wins. That's what Machiavelli would call governing appearances. He knew that reality bends to the confident illusion. To act rich in thought is not arrogance, it's strategic hypnosis. People don't follow truth. They follow projection. But let's descend deeper, because this isn't motivational fluff. This is psychological engineering. When you see money as scarce, your brain obeys that scarcity. Every decision you make becomes defensive, cautious, reactive. You sell time, your most expensive currency, for security, a fragile illusion. When you see money as fluid, a moving current of influence, you begin to act differently. You seek asymmetry, places where small effort controls large outcomes. That is wealth's true algorithm. Minimal input, maximal effect. That's why Machiavelli admired decisiveness, not rashness, but precision. He wrote that fortune favors the bold not because boldness pleases fate, but because boldness shapes perception. Inaction broadcasts weakness. Action, even small, broadcasts inevitability. You might think, but I have nothing to start with. Good. That means you're unbound by habits. You can design from zero. The first empire always begins in silence. Machiavelli would tell you, study patterns, not promises. The poor listen to advice. The rich observe repetition. Watch any market long enough and you'll notice human emotion repeating in cycles. Greed, fear, hope, euphoria, collapse. Learn to stand outside those waves. Don't swim in them. Chart them. You'll find that most fortunes were built not on innovation, but on timing human behavior. Your mind must become an observatory. Every decision, a calculated move in a chess game, others don't even realize they're playing. That's why wealth is psychological, because to hold composure when others lose it is to print your own currency. Ask yourself, when was the last time you acted from calm strategy rather than emotional reaction? When you stop chasing, people start offering. When you stop explaining, others start guessing. Power lives in the silent observer. Machiavelli wrote that love is preserved by obligation, but fear by punishment. Translate that into economics. Respect is preserved by consistency, wealth by discipline. Let's talk about the discipline of detachment. Most people are enslaved not by lack of money, but by attachment to comfort. The poor cling to certainty. The rich cling to control. The difference is subtle and fatal. Every time you hesitate to spend strategically, to invest in leverage, you train your mind to worship fear. Every time you redirect your resources into influence, skills, positioning, relationships, you plant seeds that multiply. Wealth follows courage disguised as analysis. Look at any self-made magnate and you'll see a psychological trait repeating, the ability to see loss as investment. Machiavelli warned rulers never to appear dependent on fortune. When you act as though loss is learning, people instinctively believe you command the game. That's why psychological wealth isn't about luxury, it's about narrative control. If your life tells a story of movement, purpose, and adaptability, others will feed that narrative with opportunities. That's human nature. We invest in momentum. You become magnetic when your energy suggests inevitability. Now imagine this. Two people enter the same room. One carries anxiety, a vibration of scarcity. The other radiates calm dominance, not arrogance, but quiet clarity. The room rearranges itself around the second. Opportunities orbit confidence. That's the Machiavellian truth most never see. Money follows authority of mind, not hours of labor. Let that sink in. Think about all the people who spend years begging for promotions, chasing trends, praying for luck. They've outsourced power. They wait to be chosen. But in the psychology of wealth, waiting is poverty. Action, properly timed, is royalty. The moment you stop begging for approval, you trigger curiosity. People start to wonder what you know that they don't. That's the first invisible asset, mystique. In Machiavelli's world, mystery equals power. The less predictable your behavior, the more valuable your attention becomes. In practical terms, this means never reveal your entire plan. Speak less than you think. Deliver more than expected. And above all, appear self-contained. Because independence, and not even simulated, creates perception of abundance. And perception, as we said, controls reality. Now here's where most people sabotage themselves. They confuse wealth with display. They think status symbols attract success. But in truth, overt luxury leaks insecurity. Real wealth whispers. It doesn't need to prove. Machiavelli's mind would analyze luxury as theater, a costume used strategically, not habitually. Use it when it strengthens narrative. Abandon it when it weakens leverage. Ask yourself, are you performing success to impress or positioning power to influence? The difference defines whether you're accumulating assets or applause. The Machiavellian strategist uses appearance as camouflage, never letting envy become exposure. If others can measure your wealth, they can map your vulnerabilities. Stay understated, yet undeniable. Psychological wealth isn't loud. It's unshakable. Now, let's dissect one of the deepest illusions, the idea that money corrupts character. Money doesn't change people, it amplifies them. It reveals what was hidden. The poor fear this revelation because they haven't built an internal structure strong enough to handle amplification. The rich engineer identity first, fortune later. That's why this blueprint isn't about external hustle. It's about internal architecture. You want to become rich? Then build a mind that can hold abundance without collapsing. Train your nervous system to remain calm under expansion. Most people self-destruct not in failure, but in sudden success. They mistake momentum for mastery. Machiavelli would warn, power without self-awareness devours itself. Wealth without philosophy becomes chaos. So the first phase of becoming insanely rich begins within. Mastering emotional neutrality, detach from outcomes, observe patterns, control interpretation. When you control meaning, you control behavior. When you control behavior, you control flow, and flow creates fortune. Pause here. Feel that slight unease in your chest? That resistance when you hear the word control? That's the shadow of your conditioning, the fear of being powerful. Society trains you to equate humility with poverty and ambition with arrogance. That's psychological sabotage. Machiavelli believed morality was a tool of governance, not a law of nature. Those who understand that principle move freely. Those who don't become their own guards. Wealth requires liberation from emotional dogma. That doesn't mean ruthlessness. It means clarity. Clarity that money isn't evil. It's potential energy. It amplifies intention. So ask, what intention lives behind your financial decisions? Fear or purpose? Every purchase you make, every investment, every delay, it's a vote for the reality you're constructing. The mind interprets repetition as truth, so if you repeatedly act small, your brain concludes you are small. Reprogram it through behavior, not affirmation. Action. Spend where return multiplies. Starve what keeps you stagnant. That's how wealth grows from psychology. One disciplined decision at a time. Repeat it until the world begins to mirror your self-belief. You are not chasing money. You are training gravity to pull it toward you. And once you understand that, everything changes. Because in Machiavelli's blueprint, riches are not granted. They are constructed through perception, leverage, and timing. And this is only the beginning. They told you that the rich were lucky, that some invisible hand of fate gave them an advantage you could never reach. But you're beginning to understand, aren't you? That what they call luck is only the visible trace of a structure, a system carefully built to keep them in control while making you believe control never existed. The truth is simpler and more brutal. Money flows to those who engineer emotion. Every market, every company, every empire rests not on products, but on perception. The rich learned long ago that logic never moves people. Emotion does, desire does, fear does. And whoever shapes those feelings shapes the world. That's why Machiavelli's students, the modern elite, never chase validation. They manufacture it. They create scarcity, then sell you permission to escape it. They make you crave what they already own. And while you're busy proving your worth through effort, they quietly design the game board on which you move. You've been taught to think linearly, work hard, earn money, save. But the rich think in loops. Move money, multiply emotion, manipulate perception. One plays for wages, the other plays for power. When you work, your reward stops when you sleep. When they strategize, their reward continues, even as they rest. Because money, at its core, is not paper. It's attention, belief, and trust condensed into numbers. And trust can be created. Attention can be captured. Belief can be engineered. That's the first secret you were never supposed to know. Wealth doesn't come from what you produce. It comes from what others perceive you control. Think of this. Every brand that dominates your mind, Apple, Tesla, LVMH, began not by selling things, but by selling identity. They whispered, "You're not buying a phone, you're buying prestige. You're not buying shoes, you're buying power." And billions obeyed. Machiavelli would smile at that, because he understood the oldest principle of empire. People must believe they're choosing freely, even when their choices are designed. That's the hidden architecture of modern wealth, invisible persuasion disguised as value. And if you want to escape poverty, you must learn not how to earn more écus, but how to be perceived differently. Perception is leverage. Leverage is power. Power creates distance, and distance protects your freedom. Once you're seen as valuable, the world bends to accommodate that story. You stop chasing, people start offering. Doors open, credit expands, partnerships form, and suddenly, the impossible becomes inevitable. But here's where most fail. They confuse visibility with power. They shout online, trying to prove their success, while the truly powerful remain silent, invisible, shaping narratives in the shadows. Because the moment you need to be seen to be believed, you've already lost control. Machiavelli's code was precise. Appear useful, remain unpredictable, never reveal the structure of your strength. And that's the second truth. The poor show their hands, the rich hide their strategy. You might think secrecy is selfish, but in reality, it's protective. Information is the most expensive currency on earth, and the rich never give it away freely. Every billionaire you admire today learned to weaponize patience. They play long games. They lose small battles to win large wars. They don't react emotionally. They study the emotion of others and use it as raw material. If you can master that, if you can control your response while reading the world's illusions, wealth will chase you like gravity. Let me tell you something Machiavelli would whisper if he stood beside you now. Those who seem kind often build their thrones on the guilt of others. It's a brutal line. But look around. The system rewards guilt. They tell you, be humble, be satisfied, be grateful for what you have. Because a person satisfied with little never questions who benefits from their modesty. That's why mediocrity survives, not by lack of intelligence, but by moral programming. You were taught to admire sacrifice, not power. And yet all progress, every invention, every civilization, every empire, came from those who refused to apologize for wanting more. You were never meant to stay small. The system needs you to think that way, because a person who believes wanting more is wrong will always serve those who have more. So ask yourself, when you hesitate to invest in yourself, when you doubt your worth, whose story are you following, yours or theirs? Because the rich don't hesitate. They spend money like chess players, not emotionally, but strategically. Every dollar they move is a signal, a declaration of power. They know that money hoarded stagnates, but money directed multiplies. That's the third rule of Machiavellian wealth. You must treat money as a weapon, not a possession. Use it to buy information, access, and influence. Spend where others hesitate. Show confidence where others show fear. The goal is not to protect every coin. It's to make every coin your soldier. When you deploy money with purpose, people sense it. They respect decisiveness because it signals abundance, and abundance attracts more of itself. But remember, the line between confidence and recklessness is razor thin. The rich never gamble, they calculate. They move within probabilities, not emotions. If they lose, they learn. If they win, they scale. And that's how they compound, not just financially but psychologically. Because every smart risk expands your mind's tolerance for uncertainty. And that tolerance is the true measure of wealth. Poor minds seek comfort. Rich minds seek clarity, and clarity only comes from stepping into the unknown. If you truly want to rise, you must rewire your relationship with risk. Stop seeing it as danger, start seeing it as data. Machiavelli wrote, "Fortune favors the bold, but destroys the reckless." In modern terms, courage without calculation is chaos, but calculation without courage is slavery. The secret, then, is to balance the two, to move when others freeze, to act when others overthink, to invest when fear screams, wait. Because fear is the currency of control. Every time you obey it, you pay interest in the form of lost years. You've seen it before. Brilliant people who stay stuck, not because they're lazy, but because they were trained to fear loss more than they desire freedom. But the wealthy, they understand something deeper. Loss is feedback. It refines strategy. It burns away illusions, and every burn becomes insulation against the next fire. Now you see why Machiavelli's wisdom feels dark, because it strips away the romantic lies of society. But there's freedom in that darkness. Once you understand how power moves, you stop resenting it and start mastering it. Here's the fourth principle of this blueprint. Wealth is not a result. It's a mirror. It reflects your internal hierarchy of belief. If deep down you believe you're unworthy, the world will obey that script. You'll sabotage opportunities, shrink from visibility, and call it bad luck. But if you build the unshakable identity of someone who belongs at the table expands. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said, "Appearances create reality." He wasn't talking about vanity. He was revealing psychological warfare. The game is not to be rich first, but to behave like someone who understands how value circulates. To speak, act, and move with the quiet certainty of someone who commands attention, not chases it. People mirror what they perceive. So when you enter a room with composure, you shift its gravity. And that gravity is the seed of wealth. Never forget, the rich aren't necessarily smarter. They're calmer under pressure. They think in longer timelines. They see 10 moves ahead because they understand that chaos is temporary. But positioning is permanent. So when everything around you collapses, when markets fall, when people panic, that's when you must act. Because collapse is not destruction, it's clearance. It's the universe offering discounted access to power. Machiavelli would tell you, do not mourn instability, exploit it. While others run from volatility, the elite run toward it, because they know fortune disguises herself in storms. They accumulate when others abandon. They plan while others react. They plant while others hide. This is why the rich get richer, not because they cheat, but because they anticipate. They know the masses will always seek safety first, and safety always costs more than courage. That's the invisible tax you've been paying your entire life, the price of playing it safe. But there's a moment, and maybe it's now, when you realize safety is the most expensive illusion in existence. When you stop worshiping security, you start building power. And power, unlike comfort, compounds infinitely. Now, listen carefully. This is where everything shifts. Power begins the moment you stop asking for permission. Permission to start. Permission to dream. Permission to invest. Permission to speak. To risk. To expand. Because no one will ever grant it to you. The rich don't ask for permission. They create momentum. That's your fifth and final rule of Machiavellian wealth. Act as if you already deserve the results you seek. The world rearranges itself around those who move with conviction. When you embody certainty, opportunities align. People start saying yes before you finish speaking. Not because they understand your plan, but because they feel your direction. That's how power really works. It's not spoken. It's sensed. It's a psychological vibration that makes others believe you know something they don't. You don't need to prove it. Just protect it. So here's your task. From now on, every decision you make, financial or personal, must serve one of three purposes: to expand your leverage, protect your freedom, or strengthen your composure. If it doesn't do one of those things, it's a distraction. That's how the wealthy filter their world. They don't ask, can I afford this? They ask, does this increase my control? When you start thinking that way, you enter a different economy, the economy of intention. You no longer chase success, you design it. And when you finally see money as energy, fluid, emotional, strategic, you realize you were never poor. You were just untrained. Because poverty isn't lack of cash, it's lack of clarity, and clarity is earned through courage. So let me leave you with this. Every time you choose comfort over risk, you train your brain to obey fear. Every time you choose fear over clarity, you reinforce the architecture of poverty. And every time you choose clarity over emotion, you break the system. Machiavelli's blueprint was never about greed. It was about freedom through strategy. And freedom, in its purest form, is mastery over emotion, yours and others. You can start today, control one emotion, one decision, one pattern of hesitation, and you'll already be richer than 99% of people you know. But if you want more, if you want to join the few who see behind the curtain, then listen closely, because this is your moment. Right now, you're standing at the border between who you were told to be and who you're meant to become. If you've watched until now, it means you're ready. You don't need luck. You don't need permission. You need vision, discipline, and the courage to act when others freeze. Subscribe now, not just to this channel, but to a new identity. Join the circle of those who refuse to live by borrowed beliefs. Because this isn't just a video, it's an initiation. And only a few will understand that. Like this video, leave your comment below, and join this growing order of minds who are rewriting the rules of power, perception, and wealth. Every subscription strengthens this project and brings us closer to a world where knowledge isn't hidden, it's weaponized. So ask yourself, are you ready to stop surviving and start designing destiny? Because once you know the code, there's no going back.